Welcome to Council Chambers virtually on this beautiful January 11th, 2021. This is our first meeting in the 2021 season. And before we start, I just want to give a little bit of congratulations to our town staff for the great fireworks display that they put on. Safe and sound. Everybody was in their vehicles. That came out without a hitch. So congratulations to our town staff for adopting and changing our events to make sure that they adhere to the provincial regulations and protocols so that we can keep our community safe and continue to bend down the curve. Members of council, again, this is a virtual meeting, so I'm going to ask that you be mindful that your mics are on mute and your video is off when you're not speaking or presenting, as that helps with the bandwidth for members of council and members of administration. Also, for voting, I will be calling the questions, and if you can use your raise hand function, and please keep them up. Do not lower your hand. Our staff will count them, and then they will lower your hand for you after the count has been recorded. Okay. And if you'd like to speak and ask questions, please text me. That way it kind of builds up a queuing line, and I can just read off one after the other to see who speaks next. Okay, with that, we have an agenda before you. Town manager, has there anything been that needs to be added to the current agenda?
No, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, Deputy Mayor, can I have you make a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council adopt the January 11th, 2021 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that vote is unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our agenda is number 3, which is the public input session. As we know, this is a virtual meeting, so people have to register, and then they can have something written and read into our council meetings, or they can join us virtually. Town manager, has anybody requested to speak at this point in time?
Your Worship, I have not been notified that anybody registered for the public input session today.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to number 4, which is presentations and delegations. There are none. So moving on to the next one is number 5, is statutory public hearings. And again, today we do not have any at hand. Moving on to number 6 is the adoption of council minutes. Council's had the opportunity to review them. And I'll go to Councillor Bennett, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move acceptance of I move that Town Council approve the December 14th, 2020 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding those minutes? Okay. See nothing has come through. We'll call the question. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I have 6 hands raised in favor.
Okay, all those opposed?
Sorry, I don't see another hand raised.
Okay, so somebody missed putting up the hand up during the meeting. Do you remember who it was?
I didn't see Councillor Bennett's hand raised.
Okay. Councillor Bennett, verbally?
Yes, I vote in favor.
Okay, thank you. And that has passed unanimously 7-0. Moving on to number 7, which is Council Boards, Commission, and Committee minutes. Councillor Meyer, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The town council received the council boards and committee meeting minutes for information.
Thank you very much. Members of council, again, this is 7.1 and 7.2, the Stony Plain Public Library and the TLC facility. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the minutes? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question on 7-1. It was regarding the surplus construction budget. Just wondering the reason for the surplus and the amount.
Okay. Thank you. The representative would be Councillor Meyer.
Councillor Matties, I will take your question and seek clarification for you, if that will suffice, and get back to you.
Okay. Thank you. And Councillor Meyer, and that was kind of, as you're the current appointee, but I see in the minutes has Councillor Bennett as the representative at that time. So maybe Councillor Bennett has the ability to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking through my notes of the October 21st Library Board meeting, and I don't see anything in my notes about that funding. I think it was, yeah, I don't even want to venture a guess as to what that entailed. If Councillor Meyer could follow up on that, I'd really appreciate that.
Okay, and I think Councillor Bennett, that those meeting minutes for September 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will go back to my minutes for September 16th then. Thank you.
And Councillor Bennett, is it okay if Councillor Bennett sends out an email there regarding that?
That would be absolutely fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the 7.1 and 7.2? I'll have a question regarding the Stony Plain Library Board. Any other Councillor Meyer or Councillor Bennett kind of update council on where we're at with the current move to the new library sites? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'd be happy to inform you, as our director just recently emailed us today or the day before. So Thursday, April 8th was to be the grand opening. Unfortunately, due to shipping costs, our automated materials handling machine, which is something that we'd like to showcase, is delayed. And so we're pushing the grand opening back to the 3rd or 4th week of April. That is, I will get a firm date for you. But the move should begin February 15th. And the last day open in the old location should be February 12th. Residences should be able to access the new library location March 1st.
Thank you for the update. Councillor Loy.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I apologize for not chiming in first or earlier. Number 8 in the library board, it says Masters of Library and Information Studies. Was a prerequisite or a degree or something like that that we were going to have to, that any applicant or certain applicants to work at the board were going to have. I would remember some discussion on that several months back. I'm wondering if we were able to resolve this, or is it still status quo that they must have this particular certificate? Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
Yes, now if Councillor Bennett can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that was being looked at, and I know the YRL, which is the Yellowhead Regional Library Board, is looking to is strongly is opposed to this, and sorry, that's so no resolution there as of yet, and that's all I got for you there.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I don't see nobody else texting in.
William, I can follow up on that. Sorry, Mayor
Okay,
Choi.
go ahead.
That was in reference to an AUMA resolution that came from our AUMA conference. And if you recall, that recommendation passed. And so that means that it now goes to the Alberta government. Sorry, it was defeated through AUMA. No, sorry, it was passed through AUMA that the change occur that librarians must have the designation of MLS. And so now AUMA will take that recommendation to the provincial government. So there's really not anything else that the Library Association can do. It was a AUMA resolution, and it was passed, and it is now in the hands of the Alberta government.
Okay, thank you much for that update. Councillor Lloyd, does that answer?
Yes, it does, Your Worship, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any more questions regarding 7.1, 7.2? Okay, see none, I'll call the question to accept for information.
Your worship, I can see 6 hands in favor.
Okay, Councillor Palachko. Okay, Councillor Palachko is in favor of the minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short recess here. We're having some issues technically with the sound going to YouTube and streaming, and some of the councillors are also having problems hearing some audio. So we're going to recess, allow administration to reset the system, and we will rejoin back into the meeting, moving on to 8 for bylaws. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys on YouTube. So administration will figure that out and upload the video tomorrow or the next day once to get it all edited and figure out what the problem is. So council, back to our agenda. And number 8 is bylaws. It is the bylaw 2641 /G/21, and that's the election bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's Tom Golden, Town Manager. I will ask our General Manager of Corporate Services and our Manager of Legislative Services to speak to this matter.
Thank you, Town Manager. I would just reintroduce to Council Lorraine Ellis, our Manager of Legislative Services, who's been with us for a few months. And as Council remembers, we did appoint her as the returning officer for the election. And so she's been busy getting ready for that in October with her team. And I'll just ask her to walk you through the election bylaw in front of you tonight. A little bit of background on her is that she came to us from the province and was working on this legislation changes on the province's behalf. So she's well versed in it and has been a strong addition to our team. So I'll turn it over to her.
Okay, just 1 second. If you can hold on a second, I got a message from Councillor Bennett that she was kicked out. So hold on 1 second, please. Councilor Bennett, I see you joined. Are you able to hear us?
Yes, I am now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to administration. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship, and all members of council. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you also to the General Manager for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here. So as you are all aware, the Local Authorities Election Act is the provincial legislation that prescribes and governs the conduct of local elections across Alberta. Most importantly, the next general election is scheduled to occur on October 18th, 2021. Since the 2017 elections, the Government of Alberta has brought a number of amendments to the Local Authorities Election Act that do require local authorities to begin their election planning a little bit earlier than in previous election cycles. And this includes items such as this one this evening that's before you, being the election bylaw. So the legislation does provide for a number of things that municipalities are required to comply with during a municipal election process, but it also does include a number of discretionary provisions that municipal councils may choose to do depending on the unique needs of their communities. So the bylaw before you this evening does include a number of those discretionary provisions within the Local Authorities Election Act, and it is an update to the election bylaw from 2017. The bylaw does outline such things as where the nomination papers will be accepted, the ability for the returning officer to enter into agreements with both the public and separate school boards for the conduct of their elections, the use of automated voting systems, the voting procedures, and all of the post-vote activities. The proposed bylaw includes a number of updated language and organization that helps to promote clarity and ease of reference, but also does provide clarity just surrounding advance votes and institutional voting opportunities. The most significant addition to the bylaw that you'll see for the 2021 municipal elections is the use of special ballots. So the inclusion of special ballots is a consideration that's being made across Alberta by a number of municipalities, just given the situation with COVID-19. Special ballots do provide for another opportunity for electors to cast their vote. It does help to reduce barriers to voting as well, and that coupled with advanced voting will aim to reduce the crowds on election day and allow the election team to put the health and safety of electors at the forefront of our planning. I did just want to mention as well that we are working very closely with the returning officers in both the city of Spruce Grove and Parkland County to align our elections processes where reasonable, and that includes such things as determining the advanced voting days and the associated hours, just for an example. And we are also actively participating in meetings with the returning officers throughout the capital region, just given the unique circumstances of the 2021 election, which includes the COVID-19 planning and all of the potential for additional either Senate elections or referendum questions as posed by the province. And additionally, I did want to mention as well that the Government of Alberta has provided bulletins and information for clarity in the past several weeks regarding the 2021 election process for municipalities. Again, it's mainly surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, and we do anticipate that this additional clarity and direction will continue as we navigate through the next several months and as the COVID situation continues to evolve throughout Alberta. I did mention it just a moment ago, but I think it's worth mentioning again. We are also aware of and are planning for the very likely possibility of conducting both the senatorial election and referendum questions on behalf of the Government of Alberta. At this point in time, there hasn't been formal confirmation from the provincial government that those will be going forward, but work is certainly well underway to ensure that we're in a position to complete that work if and when we're asked to do so on behalf of the Government of Alberta. So with that, I think I'll I'll conclude there, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions that any members of council may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the update of the elections changes and requirements. Members of council, again, if you can send in your text messages one at a time so I can see who has listed and wanted to speak. And first up, I have Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if this is necessarily relevant to this, but I was hoping maybe my question could be answered. So my question is how it is that one's school division status is determined. So last election, I was asked before filling out a ballot for school trustee if we would be filling out for Catholic or for public. I said Catholic, but my most recent tax return had us our status listed as public, and I'm curious if the town gathers that information to determine where our tax dollars are going to be funneled to based on whether we vote for a public or a Catholic trustee.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Meyer. And I don't think the town actually does that. The town, if you just call the town and contact the administrative staff, and they can change that on your house records. So that's where it's located and not during the election time. Administration.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just ask if our general manager or manager want to clarify anything further on declarations that way.
I'll ask our manager of Ledge to comment on this briefly.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. So the processes are two separate processes. So the declaration you make for the purpose of the election is just to determine whether or not you get either that separate school ballot or the public school ballot. The allocation for the tax is done separately, and certainly you can give administration a call, and we're happy to provide additional information in terms of how to divert that funding or make that declaration clearer for you.
Okay. Councilor Meyer, does that answer your question?
Yes, if I could just follow up. So as a Catholic family, is there anything you would particularly recommend besides being aware of their on their tax returns, how they would know, or to make sure their paperwork is correct?
Okay. I'm not too sure what the process is, but I know when I bought my house here in Stony Plain, I had to fill out my property tax information, and at that time I had to choose if my school taxes went to the public school system or the separate school system. So if they've bought a house and they moved into the community, that is the time when they get to choose. And if they change within that time, if they've been here for a couple of years and all of a sudden that they've changed school systems, they can also contact the administrative offices here in town, and they will actually adjust that for them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Your Worship, if I may further, I think too, I know in my time, this question does come up, sometimes just in passing, sometimes because someone finds out through getting a tax notice that, maybe their declaration, wasn't clear or whatever, I think through your Worship, Councillor Meyer, and to the rest of council, a good practice is if members of the public are asking you about this or how does it work, to direct them to contact the town office, and they'll speak it, work it through with the individual. Typically, again, when you buy a house, there'll be a process that you're asked to declare or comment thereon. But if anyone's unsure or not sure about it, best thing is just to contact the town office and allow the staff to walk them through the process and make any changes that people may need or may want.
Okay, thank you, town manager. I see nobody else has texted me that they have comments or questions. So I will move on to administrative staff. Anything else to add on?
I don't believe so, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Matties to move first reading, please.
That town council give first reading to election bylaw 2641/G/21.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. And now that there's a motion on the floor and we've had presentation from administration, members of council, the floor is open for comments and debate. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the first reading?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, Recording Secretary. Moving on to Council Pacheco for second reading, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That town council gives second reading to bylaw 2641/G/21.
Thank you, Council Pacheco. Members of council, any questions, comments regarding second reading? Okay, see nobody's chimed in. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that vote is carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. And then Deputy Mayor, unanimous consent, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that town give unanimous consent to consider third reading to bylaw 2641/G/21.
Thank you very much. So for members in the public that are watching, if a council does all three readings in one sitting, then there has to be unanimous consent, and that is the motion at hand right now. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you much. Moving on to third reading, Councillor Loy, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The town council gives unanimous consent to consider oops. That's what I have on my screen.
Yes, third reading. Thank you very much.
There, no, the town council give third reading to bylaw 2641/G/21.
That's right. That was third reading. Thank you. Members of council, any comments? Okay, see none, I'll call a question. Before I do that, I just want to thank administration for the work, and thank you for the double versions and the red line version as well. Thank you very much for that. It makes it easier for us to cross-reference. So I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And as we move on to our agenda, as number 9 is business items. 9.1 is the council compensation and expense policy. As council is aware, we had a presentation from the remuneration committee that presented to council just before the holiday season, and council had a chance to go over the recommendations, and we came to some kind of consensus that evening. So the council package and policy right now before you is a cleaned up version from what administration heard. For the presentation, go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll ask our General Manager of Corporate Services to provide further commentary information.
Thank you, Town Manager. To Your Worship and all of Council, I can run Council through where we sit with the committee recommendations and the direction provided by Council as a refresher, because as the Mayor said, it was the end of November when the committee presented their recommendations to Council. So the policy in front of you tonight that is up for approval includes honorarium for the next council term to be frozen, but the opportunity to look at the cost of living allowance or COLA allowance during the corporate planning process. The technology allowance remains consistent with the previous term. The connectivity allowance has been reduced to $1,500 annually. Previously, it was broke out differently for the mayor and councillor, and it would be $1,500 annually or $125 per month for all members. The educational budget has been reduced from $2,500 to $2,000 per councillor per year in the new policy, the proposed policy. Administration has some more work to do around parental leave and bringing a bylaw back to council to understand that and work through that for future council members to be eligible for parental leave and what the parameters of that are going forward. The last piece that there was some discussion around, and it was a recommendation from the committee, was around reporting of remuneration received from entities outside of the town. Currently, we obviously don't track that because we aren't paying that compensation cost. We were made aware by a councillor that St. Albert was doing some of this or moving forward on some of this, and they were very helpful in letting us know how they've dealt with it, and that's included in your lead sheet, that they are asking councillors for a T4 to be submitted to their finance department, and then that is included in the public record for the public to see that. So that's what we've included within the policy tonight. We believe that process would work. And we've put a timeline of March 15th. There is a deadline of T4s to be out by February 28th. So it gives council members a few weeks to pull their records together and submit that. We would then include that as part of the monthly expense and honorarium disclosures that we provide on the website to our residents on what we're paying to councillors. So it would give sort of that total picture. That's a quick summary of the changes in front of you tonight, and I can answer any questions that council may have.
Okay. Thank you very much, General Manager. I'm just going to wait because Councillor Plechko said that he had problems hearing. So Councillor Plechko, are you still on?
I've moved to my phone and it's a little better.
Okay. Sounds good. So members of council, any questions of clarity and understanding, please? Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, when it comes to the policy about parental leave, will that be completed before the October election? I think that might be important for anyone who is considering running in our 2021 municipal election.
Okay, thank you. Administration.
Your worship, through to Councillor Bennett, yes, that is our intention to get it to this council and well before the election, so that that's known and understood by any potential candidates.
Okay. Thank you. Members of council, any other questions of clarity? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a simple comment for a clerical correction. In the top line of the policy, it's had the last review date changed from 2017 to 2018. I believe that should actually be changed to the year that this is passed. If administration could just confirm that and just make sure that correction is made for the document.
Okay. Good catch there, Councillor Laurie. Deputy Mayor, I did have that marked too. So administration.
Your worship, we note that we do find the wording, I know that your worship does raise this. We're reviewing the wording there, but we will make that correction and make it clear going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a question for administration regarding the self-directed matching RSP program. When was the last time that amount was specifically reviewed? And the reason I'm asking is Spruce Grove has a 4% matching, and I'm wondering what the comparisons were in other communities.
Thank you, administration. I believe the committee did touch on that.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties. I would have to pull out my detailed notes. If I remember correctly, I think there were 3 other municipalities providing out of the, is it 10 that we surveyed? And I know Spruce Grove, being one of the larger ones, was higher. I would have to pull out the detailed notes, and I could do that via email to provide you accurate information there.
Thank you, Council Administration, and to Councilor Matties. Again, this portion was only added by the last committee that did the remuneration. So this has only been in effect for 4 years.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I'm not clear what you're saying. I guess what I was trying to ask is, was this considered in this review? And the answer was that there was only 3 out of 10 that replied. So it's not a very good, I guess, comparison for us to go with.
Yes, I believe that's only 3 other municipalities that actually have this, is my understanding.
Can we have that clarified?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Matties, that's correct. So the 10 that did provide responses, only 3 are providing this as a benefit. The others were not, and they did confirm that.
Yes, and the committee that did the presentation said this is adequate at 3%, considering all the facts.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions of clarity regarding the policy? Okay, see none. I'll have Councillor Meyer make the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council, 1, approve policy C-CO-048, the council compensation expense policy, and rescind policy C-CO-033.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Meyer. Administration, anything else to add?
Not at this time, Your Worship.
Okay. So council members, there's a motion on the table. The floor is open for debate, discussion, and questions, changes, whatever you guys like. Okay. Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few comments. So with regards to page 64, under the recommendations, and I have like comments with regards to recommendation 1, 2, and the reporting, which is recommendation, whoopsie, hang on a second, recommendation number 7.
Okay.
So on recommendation number 1, it basically replied or notes that the committee recommends that the following items should be added to the terms of reference, and then the council directed that the terms of reference will be presented to council approval for the next remuneration committee. My comments with regards to the following items that should be included in this. Certainly we need to have good comparators that are consistent over time, but also there is a need to ensure that we provide equity with respect to all forms of potential compensation, whether that is a base salary or per diem. And it's not clear in there in terms of that both forms of compensation need to be reviewed, and that's from both local and external committees. So, for example, at this point in time, we only have external committees that are paying per diems, and truly, that's not a fair system. For example, if you have counselors that are on external committees and are being paid per diems, and you have counselors that are in the community working on boards or committees, for example, FCSS or the Pioneer Museum, etc., they are not paid per diems. So taking a look at that, when we look at the report, 90% of the communities that were surveyed had per diems paid, and just want to make sure that that's included in there. And finally, a more simplified process to compare. So right now, the comparison would be, for example, based on the mayors are being paid plus counselors. It noted in the report that there are no other communities that are using compensation relative to the mayor's salary, but that's not correct. It's actually in Spruce Grove, the council compensation is 50% of the mayor's, and the mayor's is what is used for the comparison, which simplifies the process. So those are my comments for in terms of the recommendations, and I'd be interested in hear what anybody else has in terms of comments related to that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Matthews. And yeah, this is for the future template. So when the next remuneration committee is struck up, those will be some of the suggestions and criteria going forward as we adopt the terms of reference for the next committee. Administration, anything to comment on, to respond?
Your worship, I don't have any comments. If our general manager has anything further to add to that.
No, I have nothing to add either. Thank you.
Your worship, if I may follow up with that, then, so what I'm concerned about is that we're not giving clear guidance to our compensation committee by not having a good framework and protocol, and I think that needs to be that those types of points need to be considered in here. So it's not only just a comparator that's consistent over time, but it's also looking at in terms of overall the salary and per diem components of the salary, and making sure we have good solid information on that. And then thirdly, also the process for comparison. It would be valuable to have in here. So that's, I would really like to see that. Do you want me to go on, or do you want me to wait for other questions?
You can go on, but I think I understand what you're saying, because a lot of municipalities compensate councillors differently. Some are straight honorarium, and some are honorarium plus per diems, and I think bullet 3 kind of covers that, because it's a baseline of plus or minus 5% of the market median. And as we've seen from our last presentation from the remuneration committee, they did do that. They had some municipalities that had council remuneration and per diem, and then they did an average of that. And then they also had councils that did not have per diems, and they just had a just kind of a base salary, which I think on the presentation, from, if I recall correctly, we're both in the kind of middle range on both comparators.
Okay, so I'll continue on. So,
okay.
So with regards to the recommendation number 2 with the honorarium, and just going to your point that you're speaking of, the comparators that were used in the survey, if you looked at the first 7, those were a population range between 10,000 and 14,816 people. So 70% of the survey were communities that were smaller than the town of Stony Plain. There was only, and then 2 that were of relative equal size, so Beaumont and Camrose. And then there was 1 that was larger. So that was basically 10% of the survey was larger. That had the ability to skew the data, which made it or suggested that council honorarium is on the competitive or high side, no matter which way you compared it. When you compare that to the Spruce Grove 2019 survey, where they had only 2 communities that were smaller in terms of a significantly smaller, and then there was 3 that were relatively comparable. So the equivalent was about 45% smaller communities and 55% significantly larger. So we can see how that data skewed to a larger size of community. And just so you know, the larger communities they used were 60,000 to 100,000 in range. So my point is that it's very, very important that we are looking at ensuring that we have the municipalities that are used for the base of comparison are placed in there, because it skews the data. And you know, so bottom line is the base salary or the honorarium is probably not on the high side, on the competitive side, based on that. So then, in terms of how do we move forward with that? Well, a couple of things. I do believe that we should be having being paid per diems for your local committees and communities, or committees and boards that we're on, because then at least that would provide some equity with regards to the 9 other municipalities or the many other municipalities that are using per diems. And I'm going to give you 3 examples because I need to do this and I really feel it's important.
Okay.
I'll give you an example with Morinville, population of 10,578, a small community. The salary in 2020, the mayor was 65,667 and the councillor was 35,286. They also pay per diems. So basically, for a population significantly smaller than ours, your councillors is 35,286 plus per diems being paid. Beaumont, in 2018, the mayor was 100,000. The councillor was at $40,000. Chestermere, a community that was used in the comparison for the administration, which was not included in this survey, the mayor was at, in 2015 was 76,800 and the councillor was 35,800. I wasn't able to get the more details on that, but bottom line is a very comparable salary 5 years ago to what we're looking at here. And in Leduc, for example, a population of 30,000, the mayor's at almost 93,000 in 2019, a councillor's at 42,242. And the whole point is that we have to be ensuring that we're using comparisons that make sense, plus adding per diems to provide for fairness and equity and compensation.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Matthews, and that sounds like a great argument and conversation with the Remuneration Committee. I think members of council have the opportunity and chance to speak and voice those concerns with the previous committee that provided these recommendations. So I think we just got to keep that. If that's the direction that you feel that it needs to go, that's something that you will need to bring up the next time that they are doing the interview process with members of council.
But William, we basically had the opportunity at the last meeting, and these things were presented. And unfortunately, this was some additional information was to have been brought forward. and we did get some, and I do very much appreciate the work of the committee. I do appreciate the work of administration, but I do think that that if council would have provided some parameter and framework for the committee to work with regards to the communities that were to be surveyed, as well as looking at comparisons with per diems and how to have a fair and equitable system. And I think at some point we have to address that.
Okay, and so I just, as you're speaking, I just pulled up the town of Morinville's 2019 financials. The total compensation for the mayor was 64,000, period. That includes per diems and honorarium and salary. So it was not 65 plus expenses and honorarium and per diems. So I'm not too sure where you got those numbers, because I'm just looking at it right now. So I'm trying to understand where you're coming from and where the numbers came from so that I can have a better understanding of what you're trying to say here.
I did get it from their website with regards to the salary for 2020, and their per diems are, and that's separate from their per diems. They're paid per diems between 2 and 4 hours, $100, and 4 to 8 hours, $200, 8+ hours, $300, conferences, $200. Anyways, you know what? I just feel that we had the opportunity to really take a good look at compensation for council that is fair, equitable, and competitive, and one that moves us very forward. And I'm disappointed, but it is what it is. So I'm hoping that for the next compensation review, that these things are taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you. And you said number 7 as well.
In the reporting, I hate to go back to Morinville again, but in reporting, Morinville has a very good example with every committee, whether it's local or external. It is basically, there's a listing of each committee, what the per diems are paid, and who is on that committee. So it is crystal clear what is the requirements that, and in their case, they're paying per diems for individuals that are attending meetings locally, and others are getting paid for external committees. So I would really like to have this changed. So I would like to make a motion in this one to have the reporting not just for external committees, but also a listing, which could be a separate schedule that would list all committees, external, assigned external, and local, what the per diem is being paid on those and who is on those committees.
Okay, Councilor Mattis, I'm trying to figure out where that would go in if the motion is there. Administration, some comment?
Your worship, perhaps the general manager has a few comments to provide on this particular aspect.
Your worship, I guess I'm just trying to pull up the policy as well. I mean, the way that I understood it was the current internal committees, there's no compensation provided for those. So with the addition of these, the honorariums that are received from the outside entities, that would be a complete listing. So I feel like I'm missing something that Councillor Mattis is asking for.
Well, there's two things that I would like to have seen per diems paid, and I think there's other councillors that that may be in agreement with that as well, to have per diems paid for local responsibilities. I don't understand why one councillor working on one committee would be deemed to be a volunteer, and a councillor working on an external committee would be deemed to be paid per diem. But by having a listing shows the community what work is being done by council, and it also just is a very transparent way to show what individuals are being paid if they are on a committee or if they're not being paid, which would be in our case.
Your worship, it's a town manager, and I can provide maybe a couple of comments here and some thought on this particular one for the time being. But I think it's important to also recognize that the external bodies, I'll say, because some of them are committees and some of them are in fact corporations of their own right, so to speak, or their own legal corporation. The notion to provide compensation to board members, elected officials or not elected officials, those are decisions made at the discretion of those particular boards. So they're not decisions made by the town of Stony Plain. And I say that because it does get a little bit, I don't want to say murky, but those decisions made by those bodies are outside, the direction given by any municipal council, town of Stony Plain, in particular in this example. What sometimes where these things can be a little bit of a challenge is that, the town of Stony Plain on our financial statements are required to report monies paid to the elected body by the town of Stony Plain. And I would ask my general manager of corporate services to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the requirement through the Act and financial reporting. So it's not as simple as just listing that into the financial statements, because those are dollars that are paid by not this corporate entity. If transparency is the goal, there's other ways to achieve that or processes to do that and so on and so forth. And that may be a debate for a later time. There seems to be agreement in principle that, this was a recommendation, and it seems that council's approved or will approve to, elevate that transparency when it comes to other bodies. But I think we need to just differentiate between financial statements and just transparency and reporting, because I don't know how that would work exactly. I'm going to stop there, Your Worship. Just maybe some comments and some thought into the dialogue on this one.
Okay, I'll consider that. So, Councillor Matthews, then your intention is to have all committees and boards pay a per diem, is that correct?
I believe we should be paying a per diem for a councillor that is being assigned on a committee, a board. It doesn't matter if it's external or local, 100%. And right. I'm so disappointed that that wasn't part of the recommendations for this. And I did bring it up when we had the presentation. Secondly, I believe that reporting through a separate schedule of just transparency, whether that's for a new councillor that comes to the town of Stony Plain to work on council, that they are fully clear of what compensation they will receive and by what means they will receive it. And so, for example, to have a schedule that just simply lists all of the committees, and I really hope we get per diems in here, but just that lists the committees and just calls a spade as to what's being paid and what's not.
Right. So during my interview with the Remuneration Committee, I did bring that up because we've had this chat about it a few times, and I left it up to them to decide if, like previous, when we had a lower base salary and council was allowed to claim per diems for meetings, etc. That was changed because it was rolled up to a higher base salary so that we didn't have to do that. And I told them that I was happy with either way during my interview. I'm not too sure if any other members of council voiced that concern during their interview process.
Your worship, with regards to, then that just basically rolls in the compensation. So everybody else that's being paid on the other external committees is also getting that higher income for committees that they're maybe not on. So I'm not sure how that would be fair. But anyways, I would like to have clearer reporting. I'd like to have that as a motion here, so that at least it's transparent. Whatever is determined here, at least it's transparent.
Okay, and I think administration did that with adding the submitting the T4s from other committees and associations by March, so that it can be uploaded to the website so people can see what the total compensation is. And as the town managers mentioned, that because when we report our financial statements, we cannot add that into our financial statements because it's not dollars that the town of Stony Plain paid to the individual. Am I correct in that, the general manager and town manager?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct for the financial statements. It is a provincial regulation that we have to follow, and it's just what the town of Stony Plain has compensated. We, as administration, never had this information of what councillors were receiving from the other external committees for their work done there. With this recommendation from the committee and the change to the policy, we would now receive that information. We were thinking it would just form part of that December report. If you think of how we disclose the honorariums and the expenses on the website right now, it's by councillor by month. But with the information, I guess the other thing that's, we could look at how it's presented as we sort of work through this process for a first time to ensure that there's transparency there.
Thank you. So Councillor Matties, I'm going to move on here and then we can come back to it a little bit later if you like. So in the speaking queue, we have Deputy Mayor, Councillor Meyer, Councillor Loy, and Councillor Pletchko, and also Councillor Bennett. So I will go with Deputy Mayor. You're first on the list. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, I'm frankly a little confused. I don't know if we have a motion on the floor or not. Can you clarify, are we speaking to a motion from Councillor Matties, or are we back to the original compensation policy and some of the comments and questions that have been raised?
We're back to the original. I think Councillor Matties was making a statement that she wants to be more clear in the reporting, and I believe that administration has done that with looking at the policy that St. Albert has to include other T4s that members of council may receive from other committees.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would concur. And I do want to say, we have a process in place in which this committee is formed every 4 years, and they thoroughly review the compensation in all ways, shapes, and forms, and present to us based on all the information that they have received and all the information they have, what they feel is the best compensation strategy moving forward. I certainly think there are other ways to do it. There are lots of different ways to do it, and we can go in it with an open and transparent process, or we can go in it in a very controlled process. And I think we have to be careful because, when we set those terms of reference, we are not supposed to be guiding that committee in any one direction or any other direction. We're supposed to be leaving that open for that committee to come back to council with open and transparent recommendations based on their independent research and review that has been aided and guided by, I believe in this case, it was done by a consultant. And we don't have to necessarily be happy with that result, but at the same time, we also have to respect that. That's why we strike that committee, and that's what we have them in place for. In respect to some of the comments in regards to per diems for committee work, and that, I am 110% on board and completely agree that should be reported, that should be public information, that should be available to any resident who wishes to access that. And I am very appreciative to see administration include that in here. But I do have some concerns when it's raised about, bringing per diems into all of the other local or council created, if you want to call them committees, because also then what does that leave for the external committees that we sit on that don't compensate? Is that now up to the responsibility of the town of Stony Plain to compensate for the councillor spending time on that committee? Is that a mandate that the town of Stony Plain should be putting to the external committees, that we will only sit on committees that compensate our council members who are on them, or how does that work? That could certainly alienate and create issues. I think also listing all the committees and what the committee's per diem rates is doesn't necessarily make sense, because it doesn't provide context. It doesn't provide context as to, does that committee meet once a year, 3 times a year, 6 times a year, 12 times a year? Do they have special meetings? Do they have retreats that are compensated for? It also doesn't necessarily show alternates and whether the alternates are getting compensated or not. Another facet to that too is, we have a board, for instance, the Tri-Leisure Board, in which we have public members who sit on, and those public members are compensated. So should we be asking that the public members' compensation be made available publicly as well, or how does that work? Ultimately, I think what administration has proposed here makes great sense. At the end of the year, every single councillor who receives a T4 from any of the boards and committees that they sit on is required to submit that to administration to be publicly reported, any and all compensation that councillor received during the execution of their duties as a councillor for the town of Stony Plain. So I'm very appreciative of what's in here. I think it's very good, very well done. It's an improvement on what we have, and I think that's all we can ask for, is to improve each and every time this comes towards us. And I will fully support it as it is written, and I don't believe we need to entertain any changes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Moving to Councillor Meyer.
I think Councillor Laurie put it fairly well. I would, like him, echo, transparency, and I believe this is what Councillor Matties is. One of the things that she is shooting for here is transparency. And like I say, I don't think I could put it a lot better than how Councillor Laurie said it there. I think a T4 at the end would accurately let the public know how we've been compensated. I think letting the public know what the workload is for councillors is a benefit for all. And I'll just end it there.
Thank you much, Councillor Meyer. Thank you. Moving to Councillor Loy, please.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I do want to chime in a bit on this and I'm going to be somewhat repetitive. I have sat or have been interviewed by 3 boards now on my term on council. They are all in a lot of ways similar, but they are also distinct and unique in their composition and what they did. Personally, I do not want to restrict that board by burdening them with too many rules and regulations. I think that the terms of reference should be loose enough to say, this is what we want you to do. And by comparison to other municipalities that are as close to our size, bigger and smaller, and let them do their job. They've always been very good reports that I have seen at the end of them, as I have done 3. I'm going to echo the T4s, very important. I think too, the total compensation is out there for every councillor. If I don't sit on any boards that pay me extra, anybody who wants to delve into not only my compensation and my expenses, they'll know what I did. So I don't have a problem with that. William, you did mention that we did change the system some time back. We had some councillors that did not sit on too many boards and others that sat on lots of boards. I like the system now. I did, as well as others have gone through, and I looked up places like White Court and stuff like that. And they don't really have a package like ours. They do a lot of committee meetings, and that's how they do it. I don't think there's really any system in place that's going to be totally better than the other. And I guess bottom line, as long as the total pay for a councillor for a year is close, as relatively close, and the package is not always money. There's the benefits of it that are in there, is stacks up to other communities, then I think that that's fair. People don't move to our community to say, oh, look at the councillors get a very good package. That just happens to be the package that's offered to somebody who lives in our town and wants to run for council. And not everybody wants to do that. I'm very satisfied with what we've done. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Council Pletchko.
I have to mute here because I'm on two phones. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's better.
I'm going to assume that you can hear me. So I don't want to belate what we're doing here. There's very good comments, and I tend to agree with all that I've heard this evening. I think the only thing that I can hear that has been missed is I think what Councillor Matties is trying to get at is a compensation needs to be equal for everybody and transparent for everybody. So if you're sitting on an external board, you have the opportunity to make a little bit more than you would as just a councillor serving your local community. So what I think that has been missed, and I mentioned this in my interview, that it was important that at the end of the year, when compensation was looked at, that councillors were making relatively the same amount. And I think that's what the most important part here is that at the end of the day, compensation is equal for everybody, and the transparency of this for a community in these times is very important. It's not something that should be behind closed doors. This is something that should be very transparent, and it needs to be for everybody to see. And I think I'll leave that as my comments because I think it's everybody's made some really good comments.
Thank you, Councillor Pletchko. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just add a few points that I don't think have been fully covered. So I'll go back into history. It has always, since I've been on council, been our council philosophy that we do not get compensation for our local boards and our council boards. That's because the people that are sitting on there are volunteers, they're members of our community, and so as a general philosophy, we have agreed that since they sit there as volunteers, we should do the same. So that has always been bottom line, and that's always been at least my belief. If we are discussing philosophy and what needs to be changed, then perhaps that could be done maybe at a strat plan. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm sitting on a committee with residents who are not being compensated for that board, then I'm not going to be compensated for that board. Second, I'd like to point out that at no time in my tenure as a councillor were we ever paid for those local committees and local boards. The only thing that changed when you were referencing the change that we had was that we are no longer being paid per diem to attend AUMA, FCM, and those kinds of strategic planning. So we decided to eliminate that and to move to a higher base salary. So that was the change there. When it comes to being transparent, I would suggest, and I'm sure that it's an easy enough thing to do, that on our webpage, when it talks about the council, the councillor themselves, we list what committees we're on. That way our residents know what committees we're on, and if they have any question as to, say, what's happening with Meridian Housing Foundation, they will know that I'm on that committee and they can contact me. So somewhere, whether or not I'm compensated for that, I do think that the T4 will be satisfactory there. And then the other comment that I have, Mr. Mayor, it's you that chooses our appointments. And I haven't honestly paid much attention, but on the surface, it looks like you have done a very good job of mixing up our appointments and our assignments so that, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me like everybody is on an external committee where they are compensated by that committee as well as local committees. Now, you could correct me, Mr. Mayor, if I'm wrong, but I think that that is the fairest way to make sure that everybody's compensation is about the same. When it comes to this decision tonight and the motion that's on the floor with our two parts, number 1 and number 2, I'm in agreement with it, and I don't think anything needs to change. We've gone through a very thorough process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Bennett, and thank you for that. Then you're right. So the external and internal boards are, if there is remuneration paid, that's based on the boards themselves and based on the structure that they have in place. For example, I sit on 2 external boards, which is the Edmonton Global and the Edmonton Metro Region Board. The Edmonton Metro Region Board pays a per diem for me to sit on because that's what the policy says. However, I sit on Edmonton Global and it does not pay a per diem because that's what the policy says. So either way, there's internal and external and all boards that we sit on. Some remunerate and some do not. So if this is a conversation about should we have all local boards and committees pay per diem for everyone that sits on there, then again, I would agree that it's more of a strategic planning conversation. I know some municipalities do that. They remunerate everybody sitting on every board. For example, we're just going through a list. If we had a town-controlled board, which is what am I thinking here? So the cultural roundtable, then everybody that sits on the cultural roundtable will get a per diem for sitting on there and attending a meeting. So that is something that we can definitely talk about if that's the direction of council. A later point. Right now, we're talking about the proposed policy and compensation review that the remuneration committee has presented to us. Moving on to the speakers list, Councillor Matties.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to reply. I do very much appreciate everybody's comments and very, very helpful, good information. But I just wanted to share a couple of last things that, based on what I've heard. So first of all, with Deputy Mayor Laurie, when he talked about that we are not allowed to dictate or the parameters of our compensation committee. Well, that wouldn't be true because I know in Spruce Grove that they provide the comparative communities to compare with. I know that they use the mayor as a comparison, and then council is 50% of that, and that's specified in their policy. So just comments that way. With regards to what Councillor Bennett said regarding that the compensation was for these per diems for the local committees was placed into our honorarium. The point is, I have never been assigned a external committee where I've been paid a per diem in 4 years that I've been here. I did apply to AUMA and I was successful in being able to be on a committee there. And I was paid for that in terms of a per diem. But the point it is not what I'm saying though, is maybe in all fairness, you have to go one way or the other. External boards, if people are getting paid, maybe that funds, that money should be pooled and used for council expenses, as basically that way it's fair for all. If truly our remuneration, if our honorarium covers per diems, that to me would be a very fair way. Or B, we do pay both volunteers and councillors for being on committees that are local. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Matties. Councillor Pleshko.
No, didn't have my hand up.
Okay, thank you. With that, any other questions regarding the motion at hand to approve the council compensation and expense policy and to rescind the old one? Okay, seeing no more hands up. Again, there's a lot of good conversation around this, and it sounds like it's going to be more in depth of kind of a broader picture of do we compensate all individuals sitting on boards and committees. So that will be a further discussion into the future. Members of council, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, I can see 6 hands in affirmative.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you clear all those. Okay, all those opposed?
And that would be 1 hand opposed.
Okay, thank you. And that is carried 6-1. Okay, moving on, before we move on to 9.2, we're gonna call for a 10-minute recess, and we'll be back here in, what time is it now? About 6:48. Thank you. Everyone's here, so we'll continue on with our meeting. Moving on to 9.2, which is the integration of FCSS, and do we have a presentation from our director of FCSS? Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to speak to council a bit about the lead sheet and a request for a decision that's in front of council this evening. As you've mentioned, our FCSS Executive Director, Lisa Gilchrist, is with us this evening, and she will have an opportunity to speak to the report as well. And then certainly, Your Worship, we'll be able to answer any questions that council may have. Council received sort of 2 chunks of the request for a decision. One part authored by myself, the other authored by the Executive Director of FCSS. Your Worship, I won't speak directly to the items within my aspect of the report, although I can certainly answer questions on that. What I did want to do, Your Worship, was just provide a bit of thought as to what's in front of council this evening. So, the driving consideration for this proposed governance and structural change, Your Worship, is to move to the integration of FCSS and community social development throughout the town's operations. Ongoing collaboration has served the community well in the past, but considering mid and long-term perspective, it is believed that operating FCSS as an internal function is needed as the community and the organization grows. Having this perspective brought into the leadership team and supported through internal processes will embed this focus even further. As noted in the request for decision, Your Worship, Stony Plain has historically ensured the people focus within its MVP and strategic plans. Moving internally will make sure that this important aspect of the town's strategies, council strategies, will be supported and considered early and throughout all aspects of town planning and operations. Your Worship, I feel that our organization has matured and professionalized to a point that FCSS and social development can integrate within all of our strategic and corporate planning and to our service deliveries. Your Worship, I think from my perspective, this is a move towards bringing social development, community development along those lines to the table as we plan and prioritize all of our town strategies and service delivery. I believe Your Worship has noted there are some efficiencies to be had, but I'm more interested in the overall effectiveness and the ability to have input into all aspects of what we do here at the town office and the work of council. Your Worship, again, I believe that in my time here, 10 years, I know it extends further back than that. FCSS in its current state has been a foundation to this community. COVID has highlighted some stuff, changes in the economy has highlighted some different things, but it's my perspective that to, really tackle those issues head on and stave off some of that growing challenge of inequality. Our social development strategies need to be fully embedded in all of our work. And I feel the best way to achieve this is through a structural alteration and the in-house positioning of FCSS. Your Worship, in the report, there are some noted expected outcomes, governance direction. There will be a direct line of governance from council to the social development within the community. Again, as I've noted numerously about the internal aspect, the integration of it within all of the work that we do, right from the beginning, conceptual planning or service level planning, I think is an outcome that I expect to see, take place over time. And again, Your Worship, we do expect to have some efficiencies as we move through the change process should council see fit to endorse that. Your Worship, I'm going to stop there. At this point, I'll ask our Executive Director of FCSS to maybe speak a bit to the written material that she provided, and I'll ask her to do that now.
Thank you, Town Manager. Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council. This was a direction that the FCSS board took under close consideration. The board began discussion and consideration of moving into closer alignment with the town in fall 2019, and work progressed throughout 2020 with the board concluding with the recommendation early fall in September at the regular board meeting. Overall, I think there's three key advantages to making this shift. Closer alignment and integration of community and social development programs into the municipal operations. Development and implementation of municipal-wide community and social development policies. And an enhanced approach to our public participation that FCSS has been able to be the lead on with some of our vulnerable populations. Part of the thorough review that the board did were to explore the challenges experienced in the current state and give consideration to how a model shift would impact those challenges and alleviate them. And then also conducted an assessment of the positive aspects of the FCSS program because we wanted to make sure, as both board and staff, that any changes we made would retain the positive and effective elements of the FCSS program. We also spent some time discussing how the FCSS specific organizational values and service principles align with this model shift. Overall, I think the board was quite confident that the integration facilitates increased participation and collaboration on municipal-wide projects. It allows for earlier participation and more seamless integration. And it also allows for more responsiveness as issues emerge within the municipality. The policy-based approach is important because it allows us to develop and grow as a municipality, looking at changes and adjustments at a systemic level rather than a program or operational delivery level. And the public participation elements, retaining a board but shifting it to an advisory structure ensures that robust public participation that we've seen through FCSS board representatives historically, but also allows us to bring in our strengths as an organization in terms of public participation and consultation and engagement work with our residents. So I do want to emphasize that the board did give significant consideration to this approach. They spent a lot of time discussing it and unanimously supported the recommendation. Town Manager, I will turn things back to you to finish our presentation.
Thank you. Your Worship and the rest of the council, just to wrap up the presentation aspect here. Also included were a couple of options the council would have, certainly to endorse the resolution as provided. Further information could be sought and responded to. As noted, bylaw repeals would be required, so those would be scheduled for February 8th. Certainly, Your Worship, council, could see fit to retain the current governance and design. As noted, FCSS has done a great job in this community for a long time, and I'm sure would continue to do so. Your Worship, last quick thing on next steps is should council see fit to endorse the resolution this evening, myself and the executive director would, working with the rest of the organizational team, we would start putting in place some of these changes over the course of the next 6 to 8 weeks. Your Worship, I'll stop there. Certainly myself and the executive director are able to answer any questions that council may have.
Okay. Thank you much, Mr. Golden and executive director. Going on to questions of clarity and understanding, I have Councillor Bennett online first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if town manager or Lisa want to answer this, but I'm assuming that you went ahead and talked to Parkland County about this change, and I'm wondering what their reaction was. I'm a little nervous that perhaps their funding will not follow if we integrate FCSS completely in with the town.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. I'll just ask Executive Director to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bennett and the rest of Council. I've had conversations with my counterparts with Parkland County. They anticipate no changes. In fact, they were, as administrative staff, surprised at the model that we're using. The existing funding agreement has always been a funding agreement between the town of Stony Plain and Parkland County. It's never been a funding agreement between FCSS and Parkland County. I don't anticipate any challenges or concerns from Parkland County. A model shift such as this actually makes the town of Stony Plain in harmony with how other municipalities operate their FCSS programs, including those other municipalities which Parkland County funds.
Good, thank you.
Yes, good question, Councillor Bennett, and I don't have any concerns. Similar comments as the executive director. I know City of Spruce Grove has the same model that we're looking at right now, and there's been no funding issues with FCSS through Parkland County and the City of Spruce Grove FCSS. Councillor Laurie, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and yeah, just some general comments and then maybe one question here. I mean, personally, I have always preferred the way that we have our FCSS set up in comparison to a majority of the other municipalities, and for a couple reasons. I think number one on that is the clarity and transparency. We truly get a full picture as to what resources and what financial contribution is being made towards that social security and that social service to our community. It also, being the way that the province funds FCSS, it also gives us a great way to see that and visualize that I do have some concerns and worries might get lost with the integration of the department into the town. And again, you know, it's similar to what we see in other municipalities. Sometimes a lot of those costs aren't necessarily captured because they're shared amongst different departments in the town. You know, I think we've always done an incredible job of delivering the social services in the municipality, and I don't necessarily see that change. But the one thing that I do question and I do wonder, and maybe there could be a little bit of comment spoken towards, is, you know, we've talked for many years about the combination of FCSS between Spruce Grove and Stony Plain and Parkland County, or even just Spruce Grove and Stony Plain, and having one regional FCSS doing the work for the entire region. Because as we know, with a lot of these services, municipal borders don't matter. And, you know, so we've always had a very great working partnership and working relationship, but there was always the underlying belief that we would work towards a true regionalized service on that. And again, that's even being brought further forward with the tri-regional plan that's going on and some of the potential expected outcomes of that. When that happens, I would anticipate that we would have to go into an operational model where FCSS is its own entity, because it couldn't necessarily live under one municipality or the other in the sense of the way that we would put that together. So maybe if administration could talk a little bit about what impacts it has moving to this model, with the potential that in a short time period when the tri-regional plan is complete, we may have a completely other model proposed. Would it not make sense to continue to work with the model that we have today until such a time as the tri-regional plan portion is completed, and then make a decision which way to move from there?
Okay, administration.
Yeah, Your Worship, I can speak to that in a certain sense. So, Your Worship and the rest of council, I believe the Deputy Mayor is also pointing out, you know, the notion of our larger regional plan that's being conducted now looks to be likely presented to council in late March, and then implementation, I mean, in some way, shapes, or form following that. So, we have been looking at all of our services. FCSS is one of them, along with everything else. You know, preliminary through some of that plan, you know, it does speak to, you know, the current level of collaboration between our existing FCSS services, which is noted to be high. You know, it's starting to provide some commentary about what would that look like down the road. But frankly, you know, I mean, there's no certainty that will be a recommendation within the broader regional plan, or if it is, you know, when would it be sequenced out according to, you know, I mean, the other aspects of it. And then, of course, you know, are the partnering municipalities, would they see fit to do that? So, you know, just to the Deputy Mayor's question regarding the regional plan, yes, that aspect is in there. It's being discussed. The timing of it, when it would actually be recommended, if it's recommended, somewhat up in the air. So it has been brought, you know, there has been some consideration of that, you know, or that being out there. I would say, you know, I mean, for further integration, this proposal, you know, does bring it a little more in line with our counterparts over in Spruce Grove. So, you know, there may be a easier alignment that way. You know, the theme across the regional plan work, you know, doesn't necessarily provide that it would have to be an arm's length or outside one of the municipal's a sphere, so to speak. when they get into the options of those integrations, there's, one municipality having it internally and providing it to the other municipalities as a contract basis, and so on and so forth. Your Worship, I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure if I was clear or spoke directly to the Deputy Mayor's question, but I would offer the Executive Director an opportunity to speak to that as well.
Thank you. Executive Director.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Deputy Mayor Laurie and the rest of Council. I do agree with the Town Manager's assessment of the regional plan process and progress. We certainly, as you've heard through many annual reports and budget presentations over the years, do have very strong working relationships with our neighboring municipalities. And what we tend to do is work together on projects that make sense. So in a couple of weeks, you'll hear more about the Regional Poverty Champions Table and the work that's happening there in a collaborative approach. But there are significant elements that still need to happen at a local level. And it's being able to integrate that work into our municipal plans and priorities that I think makes sense to integrate the FCSS and community and social development work in with the municipal structure. And so I do see moving forward, I do see closer work on certain areas with our counterparts, but I also see significant work happening at a local level within Stony Plain itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Deputy Mayor?
No, I think that covers it. And I just want to emphasize one of my points in regards to the clarity and transparency and how we've managed to capture and report the funding and the town's contribution in comparison to the provincial contribution and in comparison to the legislation. I hope that the integration of this into an internal department of the town, we still continue with that, because I think it's incredibly important that we continue to shine the light on that up the chain to the provincial government as to how much support is needed in our local communities and being the service providers, the ones who are actually, the front lines, I guess, of this service to the residents in our community and in our province, how important it is for them to continue to fund this adequately and not lean on the municipalities to continually overfund this, so that we ensure we have quality service in the community.
Thank you very much. And move on to the next speaker on the list is Councillor Lloyd. Please go ahead, Councillor Lloyd.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Some of the points that I've made here have been covered. Lisa, I'm very happy to use your explanation, read the funding that with Parkland County is not with you folks, it's with us. That was a very good answer. I appreciate that. I have kind of a couple of statements here. One question though too. How many other FCS in the province are using the same model that you people want to adapt to now? By comparison, like, is it roughly 30%, 50-50, 75%? If you can answer that question for me, please. Or Mr. Goulden.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll just ask our Executive Director to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Lloyd and the rest of Council. I don't have the exact number, but my understanding is that we are the anomaly by far, meaning that having the separate board as a strategic governance board, strategic management board, there's probably a handful of offices within the province using that model. The rest of the offices are integrated within their municipality with a direct reporting relationship from the senior position at FCSS to the town staff. There are some FCSSs who have continued to have an advisory board. I would say about half of them, and then the other half have no advisory board whatsoever. So sort of the compromise balance, and because Stony Plain has always valued public participation so highly, is to ensure that we continue with that very strong advisory board perspective coming into community and social development, and therefore to town council. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I may just I do like that answer that we are the anomaly there, and that more and more are the other way that you are trying to go to, and what the town is. Because my concern was, is FCS coming more under the town umbrella? Can this reduce the provincial responsibility in the future? And are we inadvertently setting up potential negatives? And with your recent answer, I'm satisfied that I don't foresee that in the future. If you just want to comment on that briefly, either one.
Your worship, I'll maybe make a few comments there, and I think that's regardless of model, so to speak. I mean, councils in Stony Plain, administrations in Stony Plain will always have to be aware of and be mindful of, what's simply put, provincial download of certain social responsibilities. There's clearly stuff that is provincial responsibility and not a local and municipal responsibility. The FCSS program, and I know that the executive director could speak to this much more than I can, is pretty clear as to what it is and what it isn't. As long as people, we remain vigilant, I guess would be one word, to be mindful of any provincial downloading will probably be in okay shape. We can make those choices as long as we make them and council makes them willingly and knowingly of what the impacts will be. If our executive director wants to add a little bit further to that.
Thank you, Town Manager. I'm good.
And thank you, Your Worship. I'm satisfied with the conversation so far.
Okay. Thank you. Move on to Councillor Mattis, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question was answered. It was with regards to provincial responsibility as well and blurring the lines. And I'm quite in support of this integration. And thanks very much for the good presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Mattis. And I have a couple comments there. Again, one of my biggest questions was regarding the advisory board and what do we do with the current board. And I'm glad that the executive director answered that it will be an advisory board that will be more there to advise and help kind of lead and guide the kind of the social needs of the community. And in terms of funding, I had those questions as well, but I looked into the agreement between the province and the municipalities regarding FCSS funding, and that has always been an 80-20 split based on criteria and numbers that are set up through that agreement that the provincial government does with each and every municipality. So it doesn't matter if it's internal with our corporation or external through a kind of a third party or kind of arm's length entity, that funding is still the same. The amount that we have over contributed over the many years as a town of Stony Plain is because we see the social need ourselves in our community, and we understand that over contributing and providing additional dollars goes a long ways to prevention and social health and mental health in our communities. Yeah. So thank you for the presentation. Moving on to 9.2, I'll need a motion. So let us go with Councillor Mattis, please.
The Town Council accept this report for information and direct administration to prepare the repeal of bylaws 1191/G/95 and 2416/G/11 for consideration at the regular meeting of council on February 8th, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Members of council, questions and comments regarding that motion? Okay, seeing none, on behalf of council and our community, thank you much for the work that the FCS has done. With motion, if it passes, I look forward to some of the synergies and having kind of the social fabric woven into all the town's proceedings and all our types of organizations. So I look forward to seeing the efficiencies and the service level increases that will provide to our community. Members of council, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Recording Secretary. Moving on to 9.3 is the natural gas franchise fee update. Go ahead, administration.
Your worship, I believe our general manager of corporate services will speak to this item.
Thank you, Town Manager. This is just a quick update to council after the corporate plan was approved, which increased the franchise fee from 30 to 35%. We were just required to notify the public of that through public advertising, which we have now completed. There was one call received from our manager of finance from a resident, wanting to understand and expressing a bit of concern about the increase. Other than that, no other responses were received. We have submitted this to our franchise fee providers, and it gets submitted to the Alberta Utilities Commission as part of the package, and the rate increase would then go into effect as of February 1st. So just a quick update to council where we're at, and that this will come into play on February 1st. I can answer any questions that council may have around this item.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Members of council, you had a chance to read it. Any questions for clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the administration. I did have a question that was raised to me in regards to the franchise fees. Obviously, we know that we have the capability of charging these franchise fees, and we are now proposed to essentially move this to the maximum. The question that I was asked was regarding what specifically does the town do with the revenue that is generated from the franchise fees? And I found myself not necessarily able to answer that adequately. It was asked, is there something specific to do with the provision of, in this case, natural gas service within the town of Stony Plain that is funded out of this? And so if the general manager or a member of administration can kind of review essentially how the revenue that is generated through this is allocated and utilized within the town, that would be very beneficial.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Town Manager.
Your worship, the revenue, I believe, comes in, goes through our general revenue accounts. We would be allocating it across the board to, whether, infrastructure projects, planning processes and costs and so on and so forth. I'll maybe have the GM, if they want to speak a little bit further to that, can do so. I will make one other comment though, that I'm not so sure it is entirely understood in the public perspective on this, but the town has the ability to charge these franchise fees because essentially at some point, it was quite a while ago now, but municipalities used to run these, and all across both Alberta and Saskatchewan. And at one point in time, the provincial governments of both provinces came in and negotiated with the municipalities. Their ability to either build out the infrastructure, electrical and natural gas infrastructure. In exchange, municipalities gave up their right to run their own. Henceforth from there, municipal governments have the ability to put these franchise fees onto the system, so to speak. Your worship, and maybe a little bit further, and I don't mean to provide a bit of a history lesson here, but there are still certain municipalities in Western Canada, specifically Alberta and Saskatchewan, that never did give up those rights and have built out their own natural gas distribution, electrical distribution systems within their communities. And frankly, in hindsight, that was the better decision for those individual municipalities. The ones that have done it certainly do very well by their customers and their corporate organizations. So, Your Worship, I'll stop there. Perhaps the General Manager has something further to add.
Thank you.
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor, that's correct. So for us, it would, as the Town Manager stated, hit, what I would call general revenue. So similar to our property taxation revenue, it would just fund all programs and services, just a different avenue, and who is eligible to pay those costs. Not all property owners, it would be all utility holders across the town.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and yeah, thank you very much for the clarity. I mean, it is essentially as I understood and explained it at that point in time, that the revenue is not necessarily dedicated to any specific source or any specific projects, but it is used as general revenue. And I do see in some way, shapes, and forms as to how this plays into the overall picture, but I also do see how this is, as was mentioned in the history lesson, this is essentially the municipality's way of keeping a piece of the pie, and in one set of the terms, I guess you could call it alternative taxation, because it's still collecting tax revenue. It's just collecting it in a different manner rather than just through the standard mill rate. And again, some will argue that this now applies to some of those facilities that operate in our municipality tax-free, and it's a way that we have them contribute. So I do share some concern that we are up at the 35%. I've looked at the provincial comparators list that we had provided to us. As was mentioned, we have even a local municipality in the town of Devon who provides their own natural gas utility, and I'm quite surprised at the difference in pricing and the difference in I guess how that rolls out to a resident that it plays to have that. So something that I certainly think we need to keep our eye on moving forward. Obviously, we can't go up any higher, but maybe there's actually opportunity for us to start reducing that and having those revenues come in from different sources.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anybody else that like to ask questions? Okay, see none. I'll move to Councillor Bennett for the motion to accept for information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the Town Council accept the update on natural gas franchise fee increases for information.
Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, and debate regarding the accepting for information? Okay. Seeing none, again, thank you for the report, Administration. Again, this is, as mentioned by the Deputy Mayor and then Town Manager, that in the early days, individual municipalities had the opportunity to create and operate their own utility corporations. I think Deputy Mayor mentioned Devon. Devon was an oil town. It was created during the oil boom, and an oil company actually started the water treatment, the wastewater treatment, and the power, because they needed to do that because they needed to operate their facilities, etc. And Devon has continued to operate that as they become a town and etc. going forward. Deputy Mayor does make a good point about some benefits of having our own. As you read in the report, we signed an agreement, a 10-year agreement with West Parkland and ATCO for gas. But it's something that we can consider if council is willing to do in the future, is to create our own. I know there's going to be a lot of upstart costs, but there's also benefits in the future. We just have to look towards our neighbor to the east with the city of Edmonton owning a power corporation, EPCOR, which generates power, water, and sewer. And that municipality benefits from an annual dividend from that corporation. Right. So which then helps them reduce their taxes or keep them low. I don't know. They still have one of the highest mill rates for commercial and residential that I see. So I'm not too sure if that's a benefit or a failure on their part to use a utility company to offset some of their tax bases. But that is definitely something that we can consider and look at as we move forward and kind of grow from where we are right now to a mid-sized city. With that, members of council, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Recording Secretary. Moving on to 9.4 is the 2020 Audit Planning Report. And it is for information. Go ahead, Administration.
Your Worship, I will ask our General Manager of Corporate Services to once again speak to this item.
Thank you, Town Manager. So this again is an annual item that we bring to Council. Council does appoint the external auditor for the financial statements. And if you remember, we did go out for requests for proposal back in 2018, and we did appoint, or Council did appoint Metrics Group for a 3-year term. So they have been appointed, but they are required to communicate their plan to Council, and so that's attached for Council's understanding. I'll highlight a few of the areas. More as a reminder to Council, I know we've been through this process a couple of times with you. So they actually have completed their interim work at the beginning of January with our finance team and are scheduled to come back and complete the year-end audit in March and report to Council on April 26th. They've identified the scope that they look at is our external financial statements, which are consolidated and include FCSS and the library and our proportionate share of the TLC. They also do audit our financial information return, which is just another way that the information is presented and required to be provided to the province. As well as our pension plan, the local authorities pension plan, they perform an audit on that and a review of our family and community services revenue and expenditures, which again is a provincial requirement. Their strategy is consistent with the prior years. They look at our internal controls and test some of those and rely on them, as well as doing some substantive testing, which, you know, is things like pulling invoices and reviewing our documentation and the things that we have for support for the items that have transacted throughout the year. The two, or actually I thought the one area to highlight, because Council, we did have some discussion about this, was the risks they've identified, which are, I'll call them standard risks, or, you know, they're required to identify these risks under the Canadian auditing standards. And one of them on the top of page 120 I'm looking at is the management override of controls. I know Council was asking, you know, about some of our fraud assessment as we talked through some of the policies a month or so ago. And so this to me just gives Council a sense of what the auditor would test around that and get comfortable around some of these things so that they could report any problems back to Council. So that would be testing things like manual journal entries, looking at irregular transactions, and assessing any key estimates that we make as well. Their materiality is how they determine what they look at based on the numbers, and that hasn't changed from the prior year. It's 2% of operating revenue. And then finally, they have communicated in their plan just the, you know, what they would communicate at the end. And typically, you know, it's anything significant that they would find during the audit would be the highlights, or any deficiencies in controls that they would identify as well as just walking Council through the numbers and their understanding of them. I will leave it at that, but again, I'm here to answer any questions that Council may have. Actually, maybe one final point. I know the other question that had come up in the past was just around communications with the auditor, and was there opportunity to go in camera with them? And so if that's something that Council is still wanting to do, which is a best practice, we'd recommend that that's done, you know, once they've completed their audit work, and then they can report to you directly anything that you may have that they may have concern over, that you have direct questions that you don't want administration there for. That would be the best opportunity, and that would be my recommendation of how that's dealt with as well. With that, I will pass it back to you, Council.
Thank you, General Manager. Members of Council, any questions of clarity and understanding on the presentation? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Town Council accept the 2020 Audit Planning Report for information.
Members of Council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion to accept for information? Okay, Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you. I suppose this should have been asked during clarification, but just in terms of communicating now with Mr. Dirks, if you had any concerns, now would be an appropriate time to contact him, or waiting until, as the General Manager mentioned, after they've completed their and presented?
General Manager?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer. So if Council has concerns right now, or there was something beyond this scope that Council wanted the auditors to look into, now would be a good time to communicate those things. And again, as you've sort of been through, there's that opportunity at the end to speak to him as well. So I guess it depends on what the matter is. But if there's something that you're wanting him to look at, now would be the time. Or if there's a concern, now would be the time to flag that with him. And if that can be done directly to him.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Meyer?
Yeah, that's I saw that, and I was just curious if I missed his contact information.
Usually the auditor will send a letter addressed to council, and at that time he also has his contact information there, and he also asks if anybody has any concerns or thoughts as well.
Terrific.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none. And we have Deputy Mayor with the motion, so I will call the question. All in favor?
Mr. Mayor, that's carried unanimously.
Thank you very much for Recording Secretary. Members of Council, this brings us to our council information and council discussion. Again, has been some time since we met, so we've gone through a Christmas season, New Year's season, so anything to update members of council on? We'll start with Councillor Lloyd, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just one item. I'm really pleased with our weather that we've been having all along, and I'm pretty sure that the town manager and Public Works are ecstatic that their snow budget is still probably intact. So I think that's good for all of us, and really this is the kind of winter I can handle even with COVID. So that's all my comments, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two quick things. I mean, obviously, I would like to thank administration for all their hard work over the challenging holiday season. But there is a great job done in engaging our public in respect to I think we had the Christmas Advent celebration, the entire month of December, the light contest, and then culminating in the fireworks display on New Year's Eve, which I also wanted to say that the live stream is greatly appreciated. We received a lot of feedback from both residents and non-residents about how great it was to be able to share in that experience of those New Year's fireworks and here in Stony Plain. So kudos to our administration and all the hard work that they put in on that. The other thing I did want to mention is I did actually have a plan this evening to bring forward a question comment to council in respect to putting support behind getting paramedics added to the first wave of the vaccine rollout. However, during our pre-meeting today, I was pleased to see that the provincial government has now added those frontline service workers to the phase 1A of the vaccinations, and I hope we continue to see the progress in getting that into our community, so we can quickly move to the next phase and quickly move forward back to what will be our normal life.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too would just like to comment on the fireworks. I first of all want to thank administration for organizing such an excellent event, and also for Kelly Malaya, who ensured everyone had a great spot to watch the fireworks. The community that were in attendance were so connected. Even though we were apart, we were so connected. Everybody's horns were, honking, and so it was a really, really great evening. And I thank you very much for putting that on.
Okay, and good job on the interview, Councillor Matthews.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to wish everyone a happy and safe new year. I noticed that our numbers are down to around 35, and for the COVID cases, that was very, very encouraging to see that. Spruce Grove's numbers are also down, so congratulations to everyone who, through very difficult situation and experiences for Christmas, made the holidays safer for everyone. So yeah, that's it. My accolades also to our town staff for the fireworks show. I was able to share it with my little grandson who lives in Washington, so that was a great activity for me and a great opportunity to show him what Stony Plain does. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Moving to Councillor Plechko. All right, we might come back to Councillor Plechko. We'll move on to Councillor Meyer.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious if, well, first I should also just echo my fellow councillors. The fireworks were terrific, and Councillor Bennett, you're spot on there. Lots of people took and made sacrifices this holiday season, and for that we should all be grateful. But my question to the administration is, I've become aware of behind the Barth and Gossett 6 parking spaces that have become no parking, labeled no parking on account of a garbage truck's access and not being able to access an adjacent property's property to turn around. I'm curious if the town is aware of this, and if the Barth and Gossett still meets any parking to unit ratio if they were originally approved for.
Okay. Thank you. Administration, have you heard of this, or can you just follow up to council with a response later on when you guys check into it?
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we'll ask for a bit of time there to check into that and see what's happened and what we're aware of and what the rules are, so to speak, on that side. I presume, though, just for clarity, that Councillor Meyer is speaking to the parking lot that would be what, east of the Barth and Gossett building?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got an idea of what you're talking about. Yeah, we'll look into that, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you. Going back to Councillor Plechko, are you still able to hear us?
Did I not come through on the last time?
No, you didn't. I can hear you now.
Oh, the great technology of having great internet service within the community of Stony Plain. Hopefully in 2021, we can improve the ability to get all of our community with Wi-Fi and internet properly. Anyway, I just wanted to wish everybody a great new year coming up. I believe 2021 will be much better than 2020. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you. Kudos to the town staff that did come out and put on a phenomenal fireworks display, and the volunteers that helped them do it. I think it was a great joint venture had by all, and it traveled a long distance across the globe, the way it was presented. So I look forward to that again next year and working with everybody.
Thank you much, Councilor Leschko. And again, I'll echo the same sentiments that members of council have said. Just great work to members of our staff for adapting our events so that they do adhere to provincial health regulations and enjoyable to everyone still in kind of a unique manner. So again, just thank you to our residents that have sacrificed so much over the last 11 months with the global pandemic. The sacrifices that our residents and we have given up has made a difference. We are flattening the curve within the town of Stony Plain. And as mentioned by Councillor Laurie earlier about the vaccinations coming in and having paramedics added, I hope that there is enough for all of us so that we can get it quickly and we can return to some sort of normal. But until then, make sure everybody stays safe, be kind to each other. This is a difficult time as we deal with physical distancing, isolation, being shut in. Always remember to be kind and reach out to people that you're not seen in a while to make sure that they're okay. Because a simple phone call or simple text saying, hi, how are you doing, goes a long way. Just knowing that somebody's there on the other end, just checking up on them. And with that, thank you, administration, for the work. We are adjourned.